This is the S1S podcast, episode 14.
The Stage 1 Startup Podcast is launching in T-minus 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, 0. Prepare for liftoff.
Welcome to the Stage 1 Startup Podcast for startups and aspiring entrepreneurs to find out what it takes to launch any business idea from stage 1 to success. Now, for your hosts, live from the UK, Nichols and Morley.
So then, guys, on today's episode, we have an amazing guest who's going to take us into big detail on what you need to do in terms of investment and business and pretty much everything related into your startup company. His name is Dinesh Kandanchatha. He is a founder, mentor, speaker, investor, and above all, another all-round entrepreneur. Dinesh is viewed as a problem solver. He encourages business partners to ask the right questions, navigate challenges and decisions, and finding those tough answers that are sometimes too difficult to face. Dinesh has built, exited, led, and invested in over 13 companies. Now, I don't know about you, Brad, but I think that's pretty impressive numbers, mate.
This guy is shit hot. That's all I'm thinking right now.
He's a real deal. He's a real deal. If there's anything to know about transforming your business from stage 1 to success, Dinesh is the number one guy to go and see. He has a theory that every business should pass a simplicity test, which we are going to talk about into more detail in the show. Aside from being an all-round entrepreneur, Dinesh is also the operator of Macadamian, where he leads the business development at one of the hottest product consultancies in Canada. As a speaker and a mentor, Dinesh provides actionable insights to fellow leaders growing their businesses, but also focuses on product creation, organizational leadership, product marketing, contract negotiations, and a whole manner of other things as well. I had to take a breath there because there's just so many things that Dinesh is just a part of and what he does on a day-to-day basis. I just think...
Feeling pretty overwhelmed right now.
I'm feeling a little bit nervous to actually have the pleasure of speaking to somebody of this knowledge and wealth as well. So, yes. Now, I'm not going to say too much more. I think we need to pass the mic over to the man himself to fill the gaps, to give our listeners the main reasons why they should be plugged in to this episode. Brad, I've got to ask you, mate, how excited are you right now after reading that?
You took me up a level. I'm going to say that much. I mean,
I've got to bring
ready.
that question back.
The notes are out.
Yep.
The pen's in my hand. I'm good.
Brilliant. Okay, so Dinesh, welcome to the show. Can you add to that intro with anything else you feel our listeners should know about you before we dive into the questions?
Sure. So thanks a lot, by the way, for you guys allowing me to come on your show and share my background and experience with your listeners. One couple other things I would say is, firstly, I'm in the trenches entrepreneur. So I've done it a few times. And one of the things that I think that I hope your listeners get out of this conversation is some real tips and tricks from a guy that's done it, been there, done that, and has the t-shirt. And that's really where I'd like to focus our conversation, are on practical tips for first-time entrepreneurs, people who have not been down the journey and really don't know where the landmines are.
That's perfect. You're the ideal guest for the show.
Yeah. Cool. So in the intro, Dinesh, you'll see that we mentioned in part about your theory that every business should pass the simplicity test. Can you just explain to our listeners what you mean by that?
Yeah, the simplicity test is basically, don't let complex ideas and complex plans govern your business. The more complex something is, the harder it is to execute, the harder it is to communicate. And I use very simple tests. Like, for example, if you need a PowerPoint to describe your business plan is probably too complex. If you can't capture it into something that you could explain, and I use this test a lot with my own kids, is if I can't explain it to my 12-year-old and my 12-year-old get why that's a good technology, a good product, it's probably too complex. And either A, you need to think more about it. It doesn't mean you throw out the idea, but it means you need to think about it and get it into terms that you could communicate to anyone. Because frankly, businesses are built by teams of people, not individuals. And in order to get a team to be able to execute on your ideas and vision, you need to be able to communicate it to them, and they need to be able to act on it. And the more complex the idea is, the more difficult it is to do that.
I think that's such a good tip that, although, like you said, if it's not simple enough for a 12-year-old to be able to understand, then it's probably a little bit too complicated. I think our listeners will 100% be able to benefit from that one tip alone. And we're only 3 minutes into the interview. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Great.
I think, a lot of, especially startups, we're focusing a lot on the struggling startups out there, tend to overcomplicate things. So
yeah, I mean, we've done it. We've overcomplicated things before in previous business ventures, as I'm sure you have as well, Dinesh.
Yeah, this was a hard lesson, right? And, we're taught from school, grammar school up, that, use big words and, try to use, superfluous language and all that kind of stuff. And the more complex it is, the smarter you are, right? And what I've picked up over after getting bashed around in the marketplace for many years is that actually, complexity belongs in school and in university. It doesn't belong in the business world. Simplicity is what wins in the business world. And, that's a very, very hard it's a lesson that's hard for entrepreneurs to learn because, frankly, we spend 12, 15 years of our formative education learning to write complex papers and, take a single idea and make it into 25 pages and all that kind of stuff. So we have to unlearn all those habits.
Yeah. And that's, I suppose, where there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have either dropped out of school or, they've not had any qualifications and they've gone on to build the biggest companies around. And I think that's hard to understand for somebody that's gone to university and they've got all the educational skills and intelligence, and they look at somebody like that and they think, how the hell have they done it? But it is because, they've looked not so deep into things, would you say?
I genuinely believe all entrepreneurs think deeply about everything that they do.
Yeah.
It's whether or not whether they've taken the time to try to find that, the simple things they can do now versus trying to, build the big massive plan that, one of the classic tests for me as an investor is when I receive a business plan, sometimes it's in PowerPoint and sometimes it's in Word. And when it's in PowerPoint, sometimes I'll get these 40-slide business plans. And, I don't even open the document. As soon as I see 40 slides, I go, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
A Word document, the biggest business plan I ever saw was 280 pages.
Jesus
and I said to myself,
Christ.
280 pages, how many years did it take you to write this business plan? And, by the time you finished writing it, frankly, free advice, were the things that you put in there even relevant, right? And it's one of the biggest challenges is to think deeply, communicate simply. Those are difficult to do, but it's a critical skill if you want to be an entrepreneur.
Love that. So since you're on that topic, Dinesh, we want to hear from you in terms of, so our listeners can get an idea of how your journey has gone since day one. So could you talk us through, the stages that you went to becoming an entrepreneur?
Sure. So I started out, I guess, like most many good first generation immigrants, and particularly of East Indian origin, with a view that I was going to go to university and then go to postgraduate education and be one of the those classic professions: doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer. There's kind of like four that are acceptable, right? And then everything else is, okay, that's, second prize. And so I started down that path as well. And, I finished my bachelor's degree in neuroscience, which is psychology and biochemistry. And I came to the conclusion that after 12 years of regular schooling and then 4 years of graduate school, of university, and then looking forward and seeing another 6 to 12 years of medical school and whatever else I was going to end up, that this really wasn't for me. And I really wanted to do something very different. But the problem with having a primary science degree, for the most part, is that you don't have a lot of professional skills. So what I ended up having to do was try to find a way to to try to market myself and do something different. And I could have gone into science, but that wasn't, I'd spent enough years in science. So I decided to go into technology. At the time, I was very lucky that this was the early 90s, and frankly, computers were just coming on mainstream.
Yeah.
And it really, if you could spell HTML, you could get a job as a developer. And so I started my first job in customer support and doing website coding, which frankly was quite easy because it was just like writing text. You just
it
needed
was simple back then, wasn't it?
very, very simple. And so good news, I was able to get somebody to hire me. Bad news, I sucked at it. And so within like 90 days of being hired, and it was a very small team of around 5 or 6 people, they said to me, well, you know what, we really think you should do something else. We think you've got a lot of great stuff and contribution, and we love your energy, but being a software developer is not for you. And so
how did that feel at the time? Was that a bit of a kick in the teeth, or?
Well, I had been faking it for a while, so I kind of knew the jig was up. But I had good news, is that I'm a good talker. So what ended up happening was they said, we think that you can use your technical your ability to understand technical concepts with your kind of engaging personality in a field role. And at the time, as a young guy, you don't know that there's different types of software development, and one of them is called field application support. So I went out and I was acted as a salesperson for in a field sales capacity. And I did really, really well there. And then I realized that, there were people making a lot more money than me. And so I asked the founders, can I get a piece of the company, and can I take on the sales function for the business? So that's how I started. Basically, started out as a young guy on the technology side, and then went into sales, and then we built that company up and sold it, and then I was firmly hooked and proceeded to build 2 other companies, and the last one was in 2010 that I sold with a team, a big team, but it was an awesome team for nearly $200 million. And since then, I've been working as managing director and partner in Macadamian Technologies, which is a leading provider in North America of design and development services. And we work with some of the the who's who of technology companies in San Francisco, and so I get to really scratch my technology itch a lot. But then I also get to use some of my success to work with entrepreneurs, both in a board and advisory capacity and in an investing capacity.
Do you know what? I think that's one of the best parts that I love about this podcast, and the stage within the podcast where the guest turns around and says to us, that was the moment that I was bitten by the bug, that I just had to kind of take the route of employment and turn it into entrepreneurship. And I think that's brilliant. I love that part of this. I love that part of the show.
We've got a lot of people that relate to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Including us. So I think it's, it's inspiring to hear. This is what people want to hear. So I'm amazed by that. I mean, you caught me when I heard 200 million. I was gone. I was like, okay.
Both me and Brad looked at each other from the table, and our eyes just went, what?
Yeah, we had a great team. Frankly, it was an 8-year run where we repositioned the business as a provider of electronic fax. And frankly, I was a junior member of the team, but I got to work with some great mentors and some senior guys who had spent their careers as entrepreneurs. So you cannot come up with a better way to learn this vocation of entrepreneurship than that. And we built the business from 0 to nearly $100 million in revenue, and then we sold it for over 200.
And what was the time scale on that?
8 years.
8 years.
Wow,
that's impressive.
That's brilliant. That's great. Okay, then I think that intro was absolutely perfect. Could not have gone any more better. I think I think our listeners are just going to be as astonished as we are, and I know that they're going to be as excited as we are right now to jump into the questions, because that is exactly what we are going to do. We're going to jump into the first part of the questions, and these types of questions will be about the hustle and the grind that our guests have gone through to be able to get to where they are today, to pass their tips and tools and knowledge down to our listeners. So I'm going to pass you over to my main man, Brad, who's going to hit us off with the first question.
Brilliant. So, Dinesh, can you take this opportunity to tell us what made you take the investor route in business?
Well, when you get to the point where you've built a business and you're out of the grind of having to worry about where your paycheck is going to come from, because every entrepreneur spends most of their life trying to figure out if they're going to make the rent check at the end of the month.
Yeah, definitely.
Once you get out of that and you actually have an exit and you have some success, then the question really comes up: what do you want to do? And I had spent a good number of years really investing in my own company and being on the road and traveling and working away from my family an awful lot. And what I decided was, at the time, my kids were young. They were, still sub 10, and a lot sub 10, like in the 4 or 5 age bracket. And I had missed most of their early childhood. So what I decided was, really in a very kind of non-rational way, my wife and I sat down together and we said, look, we need some time to reconnect and we need some time to connect as a family. So after that, I decided that I would invest instead of being the operator, until my kids were at an age where they could, A, maybe they don't want me around anymore, or B, they're comfortable with having me around under less intense conditions. There's less soccer games and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So that was the motivation, was how could I continue to build businesses, be part of wealth creation, and deal with really compelling problems, but not have the yoke of making payroll every month. And for 20 employees or 30 employees or 50 employees or whatever the number is. And so that's why I decided to start investing, and that's worked out really well. I realized that I was a very poor investor early on, so I had to iterate a bunch of times on my investing methodology, because frankly I'm a much better business person than I am an investor.
And whilst we're on the topic of family and that time within your life, what was your circle of influence like within that time? Were they supportive, or was it a very, obviously I could tell from what you just said that it was a difficult time, but were they still 100% behind what you were trying to do?
But it was really tough, and I blame myself. Not my family. The reason I blame myself, and this is another one of the lessons I learned, coming out the other side, was that I didn't set expectations properly, and I didn't co-opt my family into this journey. So it was my journey, not our journey. And so the result of that was that they were left on the sidelines, kind of feeling like, well, are we part of this? And, are we even important? That, frankly, is a mistake I think many entrepreneurs make, is that they don't recognize that entrepreneurship is a team sport, not an individual sport. And, to do it successfully as a team, your circle of influence, whether it's your family, your parents, your friends, they have to be part of that story. And so, so it was very difficult. Luckily, I have a very talented and bright wife, Rinda, who's really not shy about, putting me on the right track when I'm off track. And so
she'll put you in the place.
Exactly. And so she took the time to tell me, hey, you know what, you're going to miss. The reason you're working your butt off here is for your family and to provide a lifestyle for the people you care about, but you're not going to have any people you care about around if you keep going down this path. And so we had a great conversation about that, and that started a process of us kind of changing how I personally think about entrepreneurship, from being it's about me succeeding to entrepreneurship really is about us as a family, achieving the things that we want. And, there's more dimension to that than financial and professional success. And though those are key inputs, they're not the whole story.
That's fantastic.
That's one thing that a lot of people will need to hear about, is that we always like to touch on the whole family side of support.
Definitely. Definitely. I think because, as you said, being an entrepreneur and being on that route within life, it can get very lonely at times as well, can't it? So I think that with with the right network around you, as well as the right, with your family that were obviously very supportive of you and your journey. And it was great that you and your wife managed to sit down and really work things out. And it's not a case of, it's not a case of all doom and gloom, in a sense of what you're trying to achieve doesn't have to drop just because of your family. You can still do both. And I think that's what our listeners need to sort of take note on the most, is that, it's a balance, isn't it?
It's a balance, and it's a balance that's best discussed and communicated and set out. So, like, one of the things we started doing, which I think made a huge difference, and just to give you a sense, last week was my 17th anniversary, so we've been at this for a while.
Wow! Congratulations!
And one of the things we started doing in the last few years was actually sitting down as a family and deciding together, how we're going to engage with each other around, because you can't change me. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm an entrepreneur. There's just no chance that I'm ever going to put in an 8-hour day. So if you ask me to be home at 5 o'clock for dinner, you're wasting your time. You're going to have a very unhappy Dinesh, right? Because Dinesh wants working, right? But at the same time, I recognize that, there are things that I have to do and be part of. So we started negotiating and talking through what was really important to each of us, and then figuring out, designing a life that was right for our family. And don't listen to the books that tells you, oh, there's a perfect way, there's a right family structure and right way you spend the time, and it's all about quantity, not quality. Like, all that stuff is BS. If you ask me, it's about sitting down with your family, the people that are in that circle of influence, and saying, like, if it's not your family, your friends, like, okay, guys, what event do you want me? Like, which night is beer night? Tuesday, and you want me there Tuesday night so we can all go play pool? Great. I commit to being there and not missing that, right? But here's the deal. I'm going to miss a bunch of the other stuff, but you know that when I'm there, I'm present and we're together and we're having a blast, right? So it's about really being committed to both communicating and setting expectations, and then following through. Because frankly, if you don't follow through, nobody's going to believe you. And we've done that for years. And the big thing for me now is, we take 4 or 5 weeks off at Christmas time and we travel the world as a family. And that's the negotiation. That's the agreement we have, is I pull the kids out of school, we go out and we go to somewhere amazing. And that 5 weeks is about us as a family bonding over a set of experiences. But that was negotiated over time.
I absolutely love that. I think that's fantastic. And it's like that in my head, that's like the perfect sort of scenario. Okay, so next question for you, Dinesh. Do you have to have a certain type of personality to be a confident investor? What personal traits are there?
I think the biggest thing is curiosity, right? Mm-hmm. So the most important thing as an investor is to be curious. And then be skeptical would be number 2. So the fact is that, there's a lot of people that say a lot of things. Skeptical does not mean negative and cynical. Those are not the same thing. So I'm choosing my words carefully. Sure. Skeptical says, that's interesting. Tell me more. Cynical says, you're full of something. Right? So that's the key to me, just being curious, to always be interested in the potential for a business opportunity and searching those out, and then be skeptical. So you are able to balance that curiosity with, okay, well, how would that happen? Tell me again. And then why is that important? I have a rule of 3 whys. Whenever an entrepreneur tells me, oh, I've got this awesome idea, I'm like, my first question is, well, why would that make money? Well, and if they answer that question, then so why does anybody care about that? And so if you get to 3 whys deep, you can often test whether or not somebody's actually spent the time to think things through, and whether it's worth a subsequent conversation. But those are the 2 key elements: curiosity and skepticism. And then, frankly, if you get those 2 things right, then a lot of the other stuff will come together.
So basically, to get yourself in front of Dinesh, it's basically like being on Dragon's Den, or what's the other one in America? Is it Shark Tank?
I try to be a little bit nicer than those guys, because I find that they sometimes try to, crush the soul.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to watch as well sometimes.
Yeah, entrepreneurship is hard, and frankly, look, I will always be honest, but I know like I am not all knowing, and so therefore, there is an opportunity in the world where dog poop makes a ton of money, and would I invest in that? No. Does that mean that it's a bad idea? Well, I don't have enough ego to say that
Yeah.
somebody somewhere couldn't make that into a multi-million-dollar business.
Sure. No, yeah, and you've got, in a way, as you was quite stating earlier, you've got to have that sort of toughness still to know that you're not just falling for everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Perfect. So now that we're actually on that topic, the main attraction on your website to me was the whole thing about, let's have a coffee. And to me, that speaks, it speaks more of a personal approach, because I would feel more comfortable in, if I was on the other end of it and I was looking for you to invest in my business, I would feel more comfortable with that. So can you tell us why you sort of take that approach with investing?
Yeah. So the fact is that there's tons of money out there. What there aren't is good partnerships. People underestimate how much money is actually available out there, and with bad ideas get funded, good ideas get funded. It's less about the money. It's more about, can you and I work together? Can we as a team build this business together? And that's more about coffee than it is about checks, right? So if you
Sure.
and I can sit down and have a coffee together, and we both leave that conversation going, I would like to do that again, then you know what? There's a good chance that we'll find a way to work together. It may not be in this business. It might be in some other business. It might be some other capacity that we haven't seen. But the fact is that if there's a values match and a connection at that level, good things will happen. And frankly, the money will either is tangential to that conversation. And what I found in my career is that when I invest time in meeting people, and frankly meeting people and then not meeting people who don't matter, like not meeting, but like I being transparent with people, saying, hey, you know what, I don't think we connected here, and so therefore, like, good luck on your journey. Being clear on both of those things has resulted in tons of business opportunities where I've met somebody and then I met somebody else, and I'm like, those two guys should meet each other because they can go build a business together. And that's happened multiple times where I've been able to connect folks and then offer a little bit of kind of a insight, and then they went off and they built a business, and were nice enough to give me a little piece of that. So that's kind of the idea, is we are a community, business people and entrepreneurs, and communities are built on connections and people connections.
I think what we've noticed on our journey so far, and it's not as long as your journey that you've had. I mean, we've been going for around 18 months now. We've had about 3 different business ideas, some not so successful. But what we've noticed is that entrepreneurs and startup companies and anybody that's kind of within those fields, they're generally really nice people as well.
Yeah, I think there are, of course, the stories of people. There's everybody knows, they see them on TV and stuff. The few that are really not nice people, but the vast majority of folks, I think, who are out trying to do something in the world to build a business, they're doing it for good reasons. They want to make the world a better place. They believe there's a real problem that needs to be solved, and they're doing it with good heart, good intention, and incredible amount of effort. And you have to respect those things. And there are people who are, of course, unethical, and they would be unethical if they were an entrepreneur or something else. But for the most part, I agree with you that folks are genuinely good and are just seeking out information and connections so that they can move farther down the path on their own journey.
Brilliant.
Now, Dinesh, the whole one thing that we always have a chat about, myself and Greg, is that there's tons of people out there on social media that claim to be things they aren't. I don't know how many people you've seen in their bio that has about 5 different things. Forex trader, investor,
lifestyle entrepreneur,
coach, business coach, blah blah. And I'm always seeing like young people with their bios saying that they're investors.
Learn how to make $10,000 a day.
Yeah. But what I actually want to know, because looking at your website here and all the things that you cover and listening to your experience, there's obviously a lot of it and a lot of knowledge to share. Can you tell us, if someone was looking to go into the investing sort of route with business, do you advise that it's probably best that, they go through the stage of having their own company to learn what it takes to invest in others, or what's the sort of procedures?
Yeah, I absolutely. And the reason is partially biased because that's how I did it. Unless you're independently wealthy, you have a lot of money and you can afford to lose a lot of money, I suggest you build a business yourself because, frankly, there's no greater teacher on how mainly the functions of business. So, sales, marketing, accounting, finance, operations, human resources, all of those things. If you build your own business, you have to learn about them because if you don't learn about them, you don't have a business. So when somebody comes to you and says, I can do this, you can immediately test it against your knowledge. And there's a reason why, most angel investors, most folks who are below the institutional investing level, are mostly business people, and a lot of people have made money in real estate. It's because the fact that you need that baseline of knowledge, that baseline of experience. There's a great book. The Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about the level of experience that you need in order to recognize something as being a good opportunity or a bad opportunity. And I genuinely believe that unless you're either managing other people's money, which is a different thing entirely, or independently wealthy, and in those cases you can rely on analysis and pure brain power to power your way through. But a classic investor, angel investor, might make 2 to 3 investments in a year. They've got to have most of those at least break even. A VC, as a comparison, makes in 10 investments, they're only expecting 1 to really turn into anything big. So they're able, because of the amount of capital behind them, to be able to operate differently than the rest of us. So long-winded answer to a very simple thing, which is start a business. Doesn't have to be big. You don't have to turn it into a billion-dollar company or anything, but run a business, hire people, sell something. I guarantee you'll be a better investor.
Yeah, and it's about the experience as well at the end of the day that you gain. So when you do eventually go towards an investor, you know what you're kind of talking about.
Yeah, it sort of gives you some ground, I suppose, doesn't it?
Yeah, don't do anything unless you've done it first, because people will bullshit you, right? And so, if you want to be a real estate investor, buy a property first, and then go and property manage it yourself, and have to deal with tenants and people who don't pay the bill and people who tear your place up, and go through all that experience. Treat it as education, and then when you do decide to invest, you'll get much better results.
Okay, so whilst we're on the topic of investment and everything that you do in the background, is there anything you look for in particular in a startup business before you decide you want to invest in that company?
Yeah, there's many things. The first is do I get it? Right. So I don't invest in anything I don't understand. And frankly, there's a lot out there I don't understand. So I don't invest in those things. And so that's the first and most important thing is, do I understand it? And once I understand it, do I believe this team can execute on it? And if this team can't, what is the gap and what would need to happen? And that's where, that's kind of question number 2. And then question number 3 is, how could I personally accelerate this business? So, when I look at investing, what I'm really trying to do is maximize the return on my capital. So if I'm going to give you $50,000 of my money, what I want to do is within 6 months be able to generate 10 times that in business for that business, because that will generate a big return on my capital. And so I want to use all of my assets against that investment I make. So if I don't have a network in that space, if I don't know anything about it, if I can't help raise subsequent rounds of funding because I don't know who other investors are that would be interested, if I can't personally sell it, any of those things, I would tend not to invest in it. But those are the 3 big things. And then ultimately, is it a business? Does the business make sense? There's a bunch of financial and operational and intellectual property things I look at as well. But that all comes much farther down the list.
Awesome. And just whilst you're at it, is there any particular sort of timescale that you look for within, receiving your sort of return on investment? Or does it depend on different types of businesses?
Well, I mean, I have one, written down somewhere. I've done a horrible job of achieving it, but the idea is that within 3 years I should get my money back. So
Okay.
far, I'm not batting very well, but all of my investments have created great companies. The exits are another thing entirely, and that's why I started out by saying I'm a much better business builder than I am an investor.
Sure.
An investor is about trying to build a bit, make an investment, have the investment grow and get your money back, right?
Sure.
That's what investors
Yeah.
do. Business people make an investment, build a business, and then, create an awesome change the world, right? Which I tend to do a lot. That even if I look at my investing, that's a lot more of what's happening than me getting my money back.
Transforming the companies. Brilliant. I love that.
Brilliant. Yeah. So, I mean, you spoke about how you can get involved with the business with the businesses that you decide to invest in. What things do you do to help that business grow in terms of what you can actually do for the business, if that makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. So a big part of what I do is I understand how to bring customers to any business, and not from a kind of yes, force of personality is a big part of it, but most importantly, building of business systems. And that's what I try to do. So when I get into a business and I look at a great technology or a great idea, I think about how could I create a scalable business system that could generate thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of customers. And having done a ton of these projects over the last 20 years, I know things, frankly, just by experience, and I have tools and I have networks that allow me to go and find a reseller that might do 100,000 units in the first year, or I might have a mechanism, a technology mechanism that would drive 5,000 inbound leads, right? So that's what I'm really looking at, is where I bring value and where I think I can leverage is that sales and marketing. And frankly, I've built a lot of product, so I know and understand how products need to be built so that they can bring customers can adopt them quickly. And those are my main areas, I think. Occasionally I get into operations and, finance and other things, but, most often I try to just stick handle that into getting appropriate expert in and just, helping at a high level. But there's very few entrepreneurs that have, really scale the business up to the point where you have hundreds of employees. And a big part of what I do is advisory, helping the CEO understand what's coming so it doesn't hit them in the face, and then helping with specific functional areas where my network, my expertise, my knowledge can help.
But you spoke there how companies now don't tend to have hundreds and hundreds of employees. Do you think that's because of the sort of internet revolution that we're in at the minute? That most companies are a huge percent of the companies are online based, meaning that the need for employees are a little bit lower now.
Yeah, so that's a great point. And frankly, I had this conversation the other day with somebody in the marketing space, and I think the future of work is changing fundamentally. And entrepreneurs of the future will have maybe armies of one and maybe 2 or 3 people. And because of the nature of the technology around what we're doing, that becomes totally possible. Thing to be aware of, though, is that it still requires system and scale. So when you think about building your business, there's 2 rules that I try to coach my CEOs are. One is, do it once. So if you have to do it more than once, build a system to do it, and be lazy. So that means that find a way to get somebody else to do it. So if you have to do anything, identify a way to specify it, to break it apart so that anybody else could do it. And then you can hire a contractor to do it. And then you add technology on top of that. And all of a sudden, you're working only on the things that you have to do. Yeah. And everything else is being done through systems, processes, and other people.
Awesome. And I think that's quite a big thing that I have certainly struggled with before, is that sometimes when you're so used to doing something, to explain it or to teach it to somebody else, sometimes you in your head seems more work than it is.
Yeah.
So you just feel that you have to do it again. But that's where you need to just, to actually just maybe take apart an hour of your time and just teach them everything. I read that actually in Derek Sivers' book, Anything You Want. He had that same sort of problem where he had so much work to do himself, that, he actually had to get to a point where he would have to take an hour or two out to literally teach it to his workers so he could go on and do only what's necessary for him to do at a time. So I think that's a big point.
The two elements of that, which is a great point, is one is invest in yourself, and investing in yourself is teaching somebody else, right? Because now you don't have to do it. And then number two is this absolutely necessary to be done? We don't take enough time to really ask ourselves, do we absolutely have to continue doing this?
Sure.
We may have done it at one point because it was the right thing to do. But you have to ask yourself, is this really generating the returns? I use a simple report card, ABC. And when I look at my week, I'll look through my diary and I'll say, okay, was that an A? Did that generate A results, B results, or C results? And anything with C results, I just stop doing. It's incredible how much time that frees up.
It's crazy, yeah. And I think it is a big thing that people should learn. So I know I'm certainly starting to get used to that now. That it is easier to just, get somebody else to do it so you can really focus on. Because otherwise you're never going to really grow to your full potential, are you?
No, you're right.
So, I mean, one question that I've just thought of, what should, if, say, for example, we was coming to you with our business plan, what should that look like for you in terms of structure and what kind of things that you would look at and go, this is legit, this is going to be big? And
also to add to that, I mean, should like people be having like a 5-year plan onwards or something, or what about the people that's maybe not thinking that far ahead?
Great question. I think every entrepreneur is different and every investor is different. But what I look for is some major sections. One is define for me what the problem you're solving is, right? And you should be able to do that in one sentence. So I encourage teams, first off, don't send me a deck. That's my first thing, is if you want to send me a 1-page that says, here's my business, your 1-page should visually, not in text, because text is too easy, visually tell me what's the problem you're solving, right? Yep. 2 is, why would anybody pay to solve this problem? Who's solving that problem today, if there is anybody? Why are you the right person to solve it? And what do you need? What's preventing you from executing today? That's it. That's all I want. I don't need to see all the financials. I don't need to see your revenue projections, any of that stuff in the first conversation. I just want to understand the problem, why is it worth solving, and who else is trying to solve it? Because if you're the first person to try to solve this problem, couple of things might be possible. One is it may not be a problem worth solving.
Sure.
2, you probably haven't done enough research. And so that's where I start. And based on that, then let's have a coffee. And then I'll ask you a bunch of questions around, tell me more about, again, with that curiosity and skepticism, is that tell me more about why, how did you come up with this? Where did it come from? More often than not, I'd like to try to find some, like, what I love hearing is, I worked on this for 5 years at company X. Like, that to me is beautiful, right? Because, oh, well, you've spent 5 years researching this problem.
Yeah.
You have a whole bunch of existing domain knowledge that is going to be very helpful in avoiding landmines. I came up with it 6 weeks ago while I was at a coffee shop. That often is less interesting to me. Because I'm like, okay, well, come on, right? Like, frankly, yes, unless if you might have a great idea there, but you're probably going to need to spend a little bit more time thinking it through than 6 weeks.
And ideas are pretty worthless until they're executed, aren't they?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? So, like, ideas are, I often say that, right? Is that ideas are plentiful, execution is rare.
Brilliant. I like that quote. Cool. How are we doing for time?
This is always the awkward part. This is always the awkward part within the show, because we kind of aim for an hour on the show, but Dinesh, you are providing so much value within this just one section of the. Yeah. Okay. So going back to the starting stages within a business, how much time did you invest in yourself and then your business as well within those stages?
So there's 2 elements of investment. One is time and the other is money. And, frankly, I want to see both. time, but you know what, I don't want to see stupid, like quitting my job. And I spent 3 years working on this, like the whole, remember, probably you guys have heard of the Dyson story, right?
Yes.
10,000 prototypes. Like, honestly, like those guys are incredible, but there's just no way my wife would let me do that. So I can't imagine that, anybody else's significant other would be that excited about 5 years or 10 years of development and all that. So bigger thing for me is to say, invest in time. If you have a day job, that's fine, no problem. What I want to see is that you've spent time thinking things through, and most importantly, that you've spent time in front of your potential customers, and that the things that you think, you have a good understanding of what is assumption and what is fact. And that's the hardest part for entrepreneurs, and that's the hardest part for myself as well. When I was starting out, I always tried to start my businesses while I'm executing on another business, because what ends up happening is that it takes the pressure of the rent check off, and with that pressure off, and food is on the table, you're able to think clearly about this idea and assess whether it's worth investing your time in or not. There's another test I use, which is, am I willing to put $20,000 of my own money in to figure this out? Not to build a business, but to just figure it out. And if you're willing to put $20,000 of your own money, and then you go and put $20,000 of your own money in, I guarantee you what you will have is either you will stop before you hit $20,000, like at around $1,000, and go, forget it, I'm not putting any more money in because I don't see potential for return. Or you will put the 20K in and you will get something that's meaningful that you can take to an investor. If you just put time in, it becomes a hobby. And the difference between a hobby and a business is the amount of capital that's put into it. So I'm a big believer that if before you go ask anybody else for money, you got to put your own money in, and you got to put your own time in. So those are the two tests: is, am I willing to do this for a year, which is a big part time, and then am I willing to put $20,000 in? And if I'm willing to do those two things, and then I actually do those two things, then I have a business potentially.
Perfect. That's a great summary there for people. I'm learning loads here.
Mate, I'm totally
I'm typing away. So following from that, obviously where you've just touched on the whole, using your own money to put into things. How was you? Because obviously you've. How many businesses by the way, have you created and exited and whatnot?
And helped grow.
Has it changed since
I've lost count, but there's a lot more that I've failed at than I have succeeded at. And that's the other part of the lesson is that you really do want to be trying a lot of things and failing quickly. And actual exits, I think, if you don't include acquisitions, I don't know, 6 or 7. And then I bought some companies, and I've been part of boards of companies that one company went public. So it's a good number. And then there's a whole bunch that just went nowhere, a bunch of ideas that went nowhere, a bunch of teams that went nowhere. And, I would say those are probably in the dozen range. The fact is I'm always on something, and I'm always thinking about the next business idea, because it's just the nature of entrepreneurship is you just see things and you go, that could be better.
Yeah, serial entrepreneur material. So from that, I mean, that's another thing we try and really put across to our listeners. We've failed at a few things. Mainly we were startups without knowledge. We thought it would be a lot easier than it was. Didn't really have a passion behind the things we were doing. Yeah. But it happens.
I think money's a big side of things as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not realising how much money you need to put into an idea.
And when you're looking just for an escape route, it's probably not the best intentions going into business with it.
No. Which is what we were in the first stages. Yeah,
exactly. But the main thing is that people need to be trying, like I always say, try, actually do trial and error. And, I'd rather fail at something than not try at all. Because that's
absolutely. You know what? You could sit on the sidelines forever. You're just not in the game, right? You can't make any money sitting on the sidelines, and you can't change the world, sitting on the sidelines. So the thing for me is fail fast and fail small. One of the things that I always tell my sales guys is, don't tell me that you're going to lose $1 million deal after you've invested 12 months in it. Lose the $1 million deal after you've invested 12 days in it. Because frankly, I'm okay with losing it 1 month in.
Yeah.
I'm not okay losing $1 million deal after I've spent 12 or 15 months on it, because my cost of investment in that is so much higher, both opportunity wise and time wise.
I was going to say, and your time is probably, that's got to be valued as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So just set yourself a test. I mean, it's just about discipline. Set yourself a test. I'm going to spend 3 months and $5,000. And if at the end of that period, I don't have 5 people on the platform, I'm going to stop and I'm going to do something else, and then hold yourself accountable.
Awesome. No, that's a great ending, I think, to this part. Before, I know you've got to go, Dinesh, and we're gonna split this into a part 2. And I think in the next episode that we interview you in, we'd like to also touch on why you decided to get involved a lot more with macadamia, because we haven't got a chance to talk about that. So it'd be great to get that wrapped up in the next one.
Yes, brilliant.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay.
Awesome.
Brilliant. So again, thank you for coming on the first part of the show, Dinesh. It's been absolutely brilliant. Before we wrap things up, would you just mind just telling the listeners how they can get in contact with you before we go into the next episode, just in case they don't get a chance to listen to the next one?
Yeah, for sure. So the best thing is to check out my website, dineshk.co. You can send me a note through my web form. The other way to get a hold of me is I'm on clarity.fm. I don't know if you guys know about that platform.
So it's actually a recommended resource on our website. So.
So I'm there. If you want to reach out, I'm happy to communicate over there and set up a call, whatever you guys want.
Awesome.
Brilliant. And we'll put everything within this episode's show notes on the site for our listeners to go over and check them out.
Sounds good.
That sounds excellent.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for joining us, Dinesh. It's been awesome having you, and we look forward to round 2.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great remainder of your day.
Thank you, Dinesh.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So that is the first part done, guys. There was just a moment in that episode where me and Brad thought, you know what, let's just stretch this out across 2 episodes, because there's just so much value that Dinesh gives. Yeah,
I mean, it was either that or cut half of the questions out, and we just know that these questions need answering, especially for you guys looking to go down a similar route. I mean, we've learned a ton from Dinesh in this episode, so I'm sure there's plenty of others of you guys that actually will take a lot from this. Yeah, and obviously what we'll do is everything that's been said on this show, we will put still within the show notes. But as again, we just knew that, Dinesh is going to give so much value, and we did not want to cut any of that out. So what we're going to do then, guys, we are going to release the second part of this episode later on this week, so that you can carry on listening to it, so that you can listen to Dinesh's huge amounts of value. So what we'll do is you'll obviously have this episode, which is now, and you'll have the next episode on Thursday. Well, that was I'm feeling pumped now, Greg. All I can say is wow. There was so much in that where we was just like, not just for us, but for our listeners, because our listeners are going to just, will they be able to take what Dinesh says and, run with it? And exactly. Investment's always one of them really kind of touchy areas within business. This is the real shit. This is the real shit. Stage 1 startup as a business is a very bootstrapped company. Yeah. But we know that there are businesses out there that would benefit hugely from investment from the likes of Dinesh. So exactly, having somebody on the show like him, it's key. It's crucial. Exactly. He's a big time player. So we've done well to bag him for this show. But stop looking at the Instagram profiles of these amateurs guys telling you that they're investors when they've probably got £10 in their account. This is the real deal now. We're talking with a big time investor. Dinesh knows his stuff. So cool. Let's a bit on that high note, let's wrap it up. So before we go into part 2 of the show, we just want to wrap things up again with the contest. This is something that both me and Brad have spent a lot of time thinking about on how we can give back to our listeners. So what you guys will be in with a chance to win before I pass you over to Brad, who's going to tell you how to enter the competition so that you can win these prizes. What you will win is 1 year's free subscription from LivePlan. LivePlan is an online tool that helps you build your business and its business plans for future goals from the likes of investors like Dinesh.
The second prize that you will win will be 5 free entrepreneurial books carefully chosen by myself and Brad. The last bit, the little added touch and the cherry on the cake, is a branded S1S t-shirt with your name on it. Also, not to mention that we will be shouting out the winner on the show that it gets announced on. Brad, would you just mind telling the listeners how they can win these amazing prizes?
Of course. So, guys, it's pretty simple. All you need to do is subscribe, rate, and review our show. Every word counts. So if you can help us by subscribing to the podcast and leave a nice rating and review, that's your step one. Step two is you need to take a selfie of yourself holding a sign that says done, #give me S1S. Can be a piece of paper, anything along those lines. Step 3 is you need to upload it. So upload your selfie to either Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, and make sure you tag us in the picture. And it would also help if you can send us a direct message to let us know once you've done it. Last but not least, you need to use the #GiveMeS1S in the description or the comments, anywhere where we can find it, because we will be searching for the winner through the use of the hashtag. For more info on how to enter and what you will win, all you need to do is go to the podcast page on our website and it's scroll down to the bottom, or literally type in stageonestartup.com/competition and it's all there to walk you through it.
So then, guys, it is literally that simple. You have to be in the game to win the game, as we like to say. So thank you so much for listening to part 1 of today's show. We really do appreciate everybody that's tuned in to listen to Dinesh's advice, and we know that you guys are going to absolutely love part 2 of this episode. For now, we shall see you then, and it's all to your successes, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Stage 1 Startup Podcast. If you're looking to launch your own business idea, visit stageonestartup.com for recommended resources and step-by-step guidance to help you succeed. Prepare for takeoff.